Hello, everyone, and welcome to our final session of Photoshop. And I am just loving what I've been seeing over the past 3 weeks from you guys. It's so exciting to see such awesome work from designers who are just starting out and who are, really, I could tell you guys are passionate about design and you're really having a lot of fun with the Photoshop software. I see you guys experimenting in really cool ways and but also following directions. So thank you so much for that. And it's been such a pleasure talking to those of you who come by the multi-sessions on Wednesday and Thursday to get that one-on-one help. I appreciate you guys coming by as well. So before we begin, I just want to remind you all, this is really, really important. So please, please write this down. Saturday midnight, write that down and circle it. Saturday midnight Mountain Time is a hard deadline. And what does a hard deadline mean? A hard deadline means that absolutely no work will be accepted beyond Saturday midnight Mountain Time. Even if you are in the middle of uploading something at say 11:45 and your internet connection is slow and it times out, you will get kicked out of the classroom, and there's nothing I can do. There's nothing anyone at the school can do. You're simply not allowed to turn anything in past that midnight Mountain Time deadline. And keep in mind, your final week assignments are worth 200 points. So if you don't get a chance to turn in your final assignments, that's the difference between your A and your grade dropping down to a C, okay? And you don't want to get a C in your first graphic design class, you want, your design classes, you want your design classes to be the A classes because this is why you're in school. This is what you're passionate about. If you're going to get a C or a B, get that C or a B in your algebra class or your management class or, those general ed classes that are not connected to design in any way. Make sure that your design classes are the classes that you get A's in, right? So you can show your passion and that you can feel proud of making this choice that you've made to go to school. So another really important thing, your teachers are, I'm the same way. Your teachers are usually not around on Friday night or Saturday night. We like to enjoy our weekends, especially me. I'm going to be moving early next week, so I'm definitely going to be really busy packing. So if you need one-on-one help with your assignments, don't attempt to contact me on Friday night or Saturday. You're not going to get a response from me. I'm not going to be available. Get that help on Wednesday or Thursday. You can also come to the Student Success Center anytime. Saturday, it's usually really busy in the Student Success Center, so I would recommend not attempting to go to the Student Success Center on Saturday, but definitely go to your Student Success Center on Thursday or Friday for that one-on-one help. And a really, really important thing, just a final note I'm going to say before I wrap things up and we get to talking about your assignment is, don't wait until Friday or Saturday to get started on your assignment, because there are so many things that can happen in life in the final week, especially leading up to a hard deadline. So in life, this is not just a class tip, this is a life tip. Whenever you have a situation where there is a hard deadline for something and it's really important, get it done well before the deadline. Get started on that thing, as early as possible, ideally tonight, right? And some of you probably saw the Monday, pre-recorded lecture, and which has instructions on how to do this assignment. So if you've gotten started on it already, that's great. That's smart. For all of your classes, try to do the week 4 work early in the week. And like I said, this isn't just a class tip, this is a life tip. You know, think about the hard deadlines that you're going to have in life. Voter registration, you know, so you always make sure that you get your voter registration done months, weeks before the deadline. Taxes, you know, I'm the type of person, as soon as I get my W-4, is usually around January 31st. I'm setting up my appointment with my tax person and getting that done in February. That way I can put it out of my head. I know it's all paid. I know it's all taken care of. And, you know, when everyone else is scrambling in April to get their taxes done, I can kick back and relax. So get these things done, these important deadlines, get them taken care of early, so that you can kick back and relax and know that you're set. Okay, so it's really important that we, as you guys are designing your week 4 posters, because this is your chance for a actual like portfolio piece, something that you can send to clients and employers to, you know, show off your skills and potentially get jobs. It's really important that you utilize the principles of design, which are talked about in our week 4 discussion a little bit. So I just want to direct you guys to take a look at those. The week 4 discussion goes over the principles of design, which are contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity. And there's, you know, a little link here you can check out that goes more in depth on the principles of design. And I talk in depth about the principles of design in your Monday pre-recorded lecture. So if you're still confused on it, definitely check that out. But you want to utilize the principles of design in your poster this week. You know, you want to have that slogan be big and bright and high contrast, and you want to have your design look uncluttered. You want to have like a consistent color scheme, use a nice consistent font so you don't have a case of fontitis. You want to use alignment so everything looks like it has a nice structure to it, and you want to use proximity where things are grouped together and they feel like they all belong together. And your discussion board post this week, just like it did last week, it's asking you to choose which one's the correct one, which one's the incorrect one. And I think you guys can probably tell, even if you aren't trained in design, that design B is a lot more aesthetically pleasing than design A, right? Design A, there's no, you know, your eye doesn't know whether it's supposed to look at this big flower thing or this thing down here. The design, the word design is very low contrast in comparison to the color that's in the background. It's just, there's no alignment at work. It's just all over the place. Whereas the second design, here we have the word design is nice and high contrast. You have a bright color against a darker background. You have repetition, so the color blue is repeated, and you have you know, alignment, so these lines are drawing our eye to the center. So here the principles of design are used well. Here the principles of design are not used well. So think about, not only when you're making your discussion board post this week, think about utilizing these principles of design in your poster design this week. And that is what we're going to get to now, your social issue campaign poster. Actually, but before I get into that, and I'm going to demonstrate how to go about making it and how to make a nicely designed poster project that will be something you can use in your portfolio to get a job. I thought I'd turn it over to you guys and see first if you had any questions, if you need help with anything from last week or even previous weeks that you maybe struggled with and need a little one-on-one help with. You know, for the next 5 minutes, this is your time. Anyone need help with anything at all? I am here for you. How to clip layers. Perfect. Let's do that. Actually, Josh, if you want to share your screen, I'll first demonstrate it on my screen, and then I'll have you share your screen and then demonstrate it. So let me find a project. Alrighty. So this is going to be good. So here we have this layer here has the briefcase. And so what I'm going to do is I want to color that briefcase red. So I'm going to click on this briefcase layer, and I know it's clicked, I know it's selected because it's blue. And I'm going to go now down to the bottom of the layer panel, and I'm going to look for the circle that's light on one side, dark on the other. And I'm going to click on hue saturation. And so right now, I've made a hue saturation layer that is on top of all the layers that are beneath it. So when I click colorize and I make this a nice red color, it's affecting the whole image. So what I want to do is clip that hue saturation layer to the briefcase layer. And to do that, I'm going to hold down the Alt or Option key. So Option if you're on a Mac and Alt if you're on a PC. And I'm going to click on the line between hue saturation and the layer that I want to clip it to. And ta-da! And now I can change this briefcase to any color I want. Now, something really important before you click on the line, you have to make sure that you see a little box with a little downward facing arrow next to it. That will be like the change of your cursor that happens right before you're ready to click. Okay, so Josh, you got it. Josh, do you want to share your screen? And then I can make sure that you're doing it correctly. Perfect.
Can you hear me all right?
Yep, I can hear you.
Alrighty. Let's go ahead and go to Photoshop.
Perfect.
Yeah, I forgot about holding down the Option button.
Yeah, no problem. That's an understandable thing to forget about.
Alright, so because this was my project.
Okay, cool.
So
let's
because
say we want to make the
I was
lemur
gonna
a little more blue and maybe darker, or put some shadowing on him.
that's exactly well ended up because I couldn't figure out how to do it. I ended up doing like if you look under his top hat by his ears, I ended up just painting my shadows on there
Oh, okay.
because I couldn't figure out how to do that.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, no problem. So yeah, just click on the little lemur and then make a layer directly above him.
Here, let me move this off to the side. Okay, so, and you go to hue saturation, right?
Yeah, so we'll make him like blue, I guess. Yep. And yeah, click on colorize. And then you can move the little slider to something kind of blue.
Would it be, do I move the hue slider then?
Perfect. There we go. And you can also darken him just a little bit. So if you click on the lightness slider, you can just bring down the darkness just a little bit. And then go ahead and hold down the option button and click on the line between that layer and the layer beneath it.
Oh, look at that. Like magic.
Magical, perfect. Good for you. And then you can, yeah, continue to move the slider around and just see what looks good for the background. And you might want to too make maybe the broomstick a little bit bluish as well.
Most definitely.
Cool, looking really good. Good job.
Thank
Anything
you.
else I can help you with?
And no, that's it. I forgot about holding option down.
No problem at all. Good luck with it.
Thank you so much. I'm definitely going to play around with this.
Cool. Yeah, you're doing good. Okay, so let's make our first or our final project rather. And so what we're gonna do, unless someone else has anything that they want help with. Okay, cool. So I believe the assignment is asking you to make a document that is 11 inches by 17 inches, but I'm just gonna skim here. Yep, 11 inches by 17 inches, 300 DPI. And then we're gonna think of a concept. We're gonna think of a slogan or use one of the slogans provided and use the images provided to make something beautiful. So I'm gonna go to File, New. And this is really important. You wanna make sure that you change your width and height to inches, not pixels, when you're making your new document, because this is, believe it or not, this has happened before. Some students will make their documents, let me show you, they'll make it 11 pixels by 17 pixels. And if you haven't guessed, that's a tiny, tiny, tiny document. And you're gonna end up with just squares of color. So we're gonna make that inches rather. So we're gonna make this 11 inches by 17 inches. And the color mode that we're gonna work in, it's RGB, but before we convert it to a PDF, we're gonna change it to CMYK. Alrighty, so we're halfway there. I'm gonna show you though, before we begin anything, something that is going to make your life so much easier, especially with this alignment stuff that we're talking about. So we're gonna use grid lines and guidelines to help us structure our design. So you'll note that here, you'll see here on my canvas, I have this ruler up at the top and I have a ruler over here on the side. If you do not see your ruler on your document, do this. Hit Command R if you're on a Mac or Control R if you're on a PC. And that is definitely one of the shortcut keys that you're gonna wanna write down and refer to later so that you remember. Command R makes your rulers go away and Command R makes your rulers come back. And why this is important is because we need the rulers in order to create guidelines. And the guideline that I'm gonna make first is something called a margin. Basically, when your document gets sent to the printer, there's always gonna be about a 1/4 inch around the edge of the document that always gets cut off by the printer, just because the page is always gonna be slightly bigger than the printable area. So I'm gonna make a 1/4 inch margin around my document. And that 1/4 inch margin is where I'm absolutely not going to put anything. And notice I accidentally made this margin here a little bit too far in this way. So I'm going to use my move tool, letter V on your keyboard. I'm just going to move that over just a little bit. There we go. So now I'm going to click on the ruler on the left, and then I'm going to click, 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 or click and drag it over here. And then I'm going to click on the ruler up at the top and then drag it down. And so now I have a nice, happy 1/4 inch margin all the way around my document. And I am absolutely not going to place anything important, no important images, no important text outside of that margin. Now I would like to find the exact center of my document because I'm going to place an image right smack dab in the center. So I'm going to use something else. I'm going to use something called grid lines. Now I could math this by knowing that, okay, I have an 11-inch document by 17-inch document. So 11 cut in half is 9.5 and 17 cut in half is 8.5. But I'm bad at math. I'm a designer. So, so I'm going to have Photoshop do this for me. This is a lazy way. I'm going to go up to Photoshop up at the top of the screen, and I'm going to go to Preferences, and I'm going to go to Guides, Grid, and Slices. Guides, Grid, and Slices. Oh, good. Yeah, see, I'm like, how can I find a way for a computer to do the work for me? That's, that's my way. And by default, your grids are going to be set up to usually a grid line every 1 inch. And I forget what the default grid line looks like. It might be kind of a greenish color. It might be kind of a grayish color. But by default, your grids will come up when you hit Command apostrophe. So that's another shortcut key that you want to write down, Command apostrophe. And Command semicolon makes your guides come up and go away. Command semicolon. So if you want these things to go away and you don't want to deal with them anymore, Command semicolon and Command apostrophe. And if you want them to come back, Command semicolon and Command apostrophe. You can also do it the long way by going up to View, Show, and then you can put the little check mark for Guides and Grid. Okay, but why is this important? Like I said, I wanted to show you how to find the exact center of the document the lazy way. And you can do this by going to Photoshop Preferences, Guides, Grid, and Slices. And then instead of the default, which is inches, you change it to %. And you make a grid line every 50%. And now that will show you the exact center of your document. And then you can click on your ruler and drag out this grid line. Just like that. So Steve Jobs says that he always likes to hire a lazy person to do the most complicated task, because the lazy person will find out the easiest way to do it. And so I'm like, yeah, how can I not math this, and how can I have the computer do it for me? Now I'm ready. I can place something in the center. I know where the exact precise center is. And then I can continue to use grid lines to formulate the rest of my composition. But now first, you may be wondering, well, I'm looking at a blank canvas. How do I possibly come up with a concept for this poster? I don't even know where to start. You know, I have here a bunch of images I have to choose from. Here are some slogans I have to choose from. I'm supposed to use 3 of these images together, but you don't have any idea of how you can possibly make this an appealing design. So first step, always with all of your projects in school, take a look at the benchmark examples first, because those are going to cue some inspiration in you, right? So for all of your classes, always click and look at these benchmark examples. You're like, okay, so this is a nice way to combine multiple image elements together, right? Compositing them all inside a shape, right? And keeping it nice and simple, right? So this is a nice, simple design here. And this is another one. So we have the slogan, we have the guy throwing paint on the earth with color. Okay, cool. So we already have this guy is one picture. The background has been expanded, and then the earth is a second picture, and then the dog was put in there to be the third picture. Okay, so that's giving you some ideas on things that you can do. Another really great place to go for design ideas, and this is what I do all the time, is I go on Pinterest. And I love Pinterest. I use it for drawing references. I use it all the time. And so you can go on Pinterest and do a little search for social issue campaign. And here are just a bunch of really great concepts. To inspire you. So you might be looking at this and going, oh, the idea of like writing on the face, the idea of transforming an everyday object, the idea of using illustration in combination with photo elements. You might even just look at this and, you know, think, okay, a monochromatic design. And that maybe that's what you want to do. So there's a, you know, look through all of these different social issue campaign posters and see if there's something that catches you as far as maybe it's a color scheme, maybe it's a use of font choice, maybe it's a use of illustration combined with photo elements that kind of inspires you. Another place to look, or a term to search for on Pinterest, is the specific like issue that you want to do a poster about, right? So let's say it's going to be like a child abuse. Right, so here's now you can do a search for a child abuse campaign, and you can like see a lot of different examples that might be inspiring for you. And you can also search for the Ad Council. Have you guys heard of the Ad Council before? The Ad Council is an organization that's been around for like a long, long time. And they do public service announcements, posters, you know, billboards, bus stop kiosks around an issue. And so the Ad Council has a lot of really great design ideas as well. Okay, so what I would recommend doing is going on Pinterest, searching for designs that you like, and you can even do searches that are more general, just searches for graphic design, because maybe you might see a design trend that is interesting for you, and you might be like, okay, I want to do my poster with this imagery, but I'll do like the paper effect, or I'll use, you know, a color palette sort of like this. So you know, you can get inspiration from a lot of different places. And build a board. You know, that's what Pinterest is all about. Pinterest is about making a board of inspiration and then having that open and looking at it while you're doing your own design. Alrighty, so what I'm going to get started with is putting a shape in the center of my document. And I'm going to use that shape to composite multiple images, multiple photos into it so that I can utilize my 3 photos, but they're all combined together. So I use that rule of proximity. So first step is I am going to make a new layer, and then I'm going to go over to the custom shape tool, which is a tool that you learned about in week 1. And I'm going to find a nice little heart shape. And I need to make this a color that's not white so I can actually see it. And then I'm going to hold down the shift button and click and drag. And there I have a nice heart shape in the middle. And maybe I might want to use my move tool, which is the letter V on my keyboard. Hold down the shift button and move this down. I think maybe I might want to Command T and make this just ever so slightly larger. And I put those crosshairs right on the center line so I make sure that the heart is right in the center. So now I want to use text elements up here and down here, but I want to make sure that my text elements align with the edge of my heart. So I'm going to click on my ruler and I'm going to click and drag my guideline to the edge of the heart here. Click and drag my guideline to the edge of the heart here. Right, and so now if I wanted, I can get rid of this. I might want the center line still, but I can get rid of this line. And I can Command apostrophe to get rid of the guidelines. And so now I have this nice structure here that I can start to use. Now I'm going to place photo elements inside this heart. And let me venture over here and see some photos. So I'll put like maybe a bunch of people inside the heart. And maybe like normalize equality. That sounds good. Perfect. That's my concept. Okay, so I'm going to find a bunch of different faces. And all we have to do is click on these links and they download. And now we place them into the document by going to File, Place Embedded, and we're going to use a clipping mask to clip them inside the heart. So it's going to be a little bit tricky because some of these have a white background. So I know I'm going to need to colorize either the background or the heart so that it all like works together. So first thing I'm going to do is hold down the shift button, and this is really important. Anytime you resize something, hold down the shift button. Oh, and how do you flip it? I will show you. So resize. And now let's say I want to flip this. I'll hit enter or return. I'm going to go up to Edit, Transform, Flip Horizontal. Edit, Transform, Flip Horizontal. And so now that flips it, and I can put this over here instead. Another way that you can do it is by placing a negative sign in front of either the width or the height. And I just noticed that my width is 0.47 and my height is 0.48. So at some point I might have accidentally let up on the shift button. So I'm going to make sure that my height and my width are exactly the same number, because if they aren't, they're going to get skewed. And that was a week 3 quiz question. Always make sure that your width and height are always the same. Okay, now I'm going to clip this inside the heart by holding down the Alter Option button. and clicking on the line between the photo and the heart shape, just like that. And now I'm going to go to File, Place Embedded. Hold down the Shift button, click and drag on the corner. That looks good. Check my width and height up at the top of the screen, both the same numbers. That looks good. And now I'm going to clip that picture inside the heart by holding down the Alter Option button and clicking on the line between the two pictures. Now you may be starting to worry, oh, aren't they overlapping and isn't that bad? Don't worry, we're going to be fixing that in just a moment. So now I'm going to go to Edit, Place Embedded. Place. Hold down the Shift button. Check the width and height, make sure that they're the exact same number. Enter or return. And now I'm going to hold down the Alter Option button and click on the line. Alrighty, so now we need to blend these pictures together so that we don't have them overlapping. And to do that, we're going to use what tool? The layer mask. So I'm going to go down to the bottom of the layer panel, and I'm going to click on the square with the circle inside of it. You know, first you have to make sure that the layer that you want to mask is selected. And then you're going to click on the square with the circle inside of it. You're going to click on it. You're going to hit B for brush and make sure that your opacity is up at 100%. Make sure your blending mode's on normal. Make sure that you hit D for default so that you're painting with pure black and pure white. And 0% hardness will be helpful so that we make a nice feathered edge. Now I'm going to click and drag, and there we go. Make a nice blended composition. And I see I accidentally, that looks good actually. Now I need to blend the next picture. So I'm going to click on the next picture. And then I'm going to click on the layer mask icon, the square with the circle inside of it. Now I'm going to get my brush tool and I'm going to paint. Just like that. And then we can continue. Just do a little bit. Just want them to be a little bit more blended. Okay, so now we have a situation where we have a lot of white in this heart shape and a white background. So there's a couple things we can do with this. We can either put an outline around the heart, and we can easily do that by clicking on the heart layer, double clicking on the blank area of the heart layer in the layer panel, right next to the word shape 1. And we can add stroke. Stroke means outline, then we can increase the size. So now we have a little outline around our heart. So that's one way to do it. Another way we can do it is we can put like a color overlay over the heart. So we can click on color overlay. Right now my color overlay is white, so I will change it to maybe blue. And we can either reduce the opacity. So it looks like this. Or we can put it on a blending mode, such as multiply. So that's what multiply looks like. That's what color burn looks like. That's what overlay looks like. Hard light and color. So I'm kind of liking the color a little bit. And we can also add a little drop shadow if we wanted to. And I'm just gonna decrease the size just a little bit. And decrease the opacity just a little bit as well. So just like a subtle. Okay, now we are going to put the text on here. So that's why I made these guidelines, because I want my text at the top to align with the edge of the heart and to align with the text that I'm going to put at the bottom. I click on my topmost layer, make a new layer, Shift Command N to make a new layer. Get my text out. And I want the blue to match the imagery. So I'm going to hit I for the eyedropper tool, and I'm going to select one of these darker blue colors that are showing up in the image. Something kind of dark blue. And we can always change it later. And I'm going to go to text. And now I am going to choose a font that is very bold, that can be read like you would read it on a poster from far away. And so Impact is really good for this, because Impact is a nice, bold sans serif font that can be read from far away. I'm going to click on this guideline that I made. And then I'm going to go to my Move tool and hit Command T to bring up the transform controls. I'm going to hold down the Shift button, click on the corner, and I'm going to make sure that my E lines up with that guideline that I made. Okay, now I'm going to make a new layer. I'm going to click on the text tool. I'm going to hover my cursor. Now it's important to remember that these guidelines I made, they're not design elements. These guidelines are just temporary lines that help me line up the text so that we use that principle of design called alignment to make things look nice and aesthetically appealing. And I just have to budge this over just a little bit. Alrighty, and now I really want to get like maybe a little bit of a brighter color. So I'm kind of thinking, let's see. I think I'll do a little hue saturation above the word normalize and make a clipping mask, Alt or Option click. And I'll bump the saturation. Maybe bump the lightness just a little bit. That's good. And then what I can do is just duplicate that hue saturation layer I just made. Command J to duplicate. Drag it above the word equality. Alter Option click. And now I think it has like a little bit of a brighter impact. Now the final thing that we want to do is add a website URL, which is one of the requirements of this poster. So I'm going to make a new layer, Shift Command N to make a new layer. And I want the text that I use for this website URL to be a lower contrast than the slogan. So I'm going to hit I, and I'll choose another kind of light color, light bluish color, so it matches. I'm going to get my text out, and this time I'm going to use center align. So see up at the top of the screen where it says center text. That's going to help me center my text along this middle guideline that I created. I'm not going to use impact because, I want the focal point of this design to be, this here. I want my website URL to be less impactful, to be secondary. So I think I might use like something like Helvetica New Thin and a font that's, something like 18-point font. And I'm going to place my cursor down here, and I'll just make up a website URL, equality.org. And I might have gone a little bit too light with my text. I don't want too much attention to be drawn to this thing down here, but I also want it to be easy to read. And right now it's kind of hard on the eyes. So I'm going to hover over my text here, and I'm going to use maybe a little bit more of font that's a little easier to read, or a color that's a little easier to read. And so there's the website URL down there. Focal point is here. So this is looking good. I'm not quite a fan of all the excess space up here. So I'm going to hold down the Shift button and select all my layers, and then hit the letter V, hold down the Shift button, and I'm going to move everything up. I think this looks better. So holding down the Shift button while selecting multiple layers allows you to move them all together. Pretty cool, right? So the next step is going to be saving your PDF, saving your JPEG, and then backing up your PSD. So Josh thinks it's too bright for the white background. I can see that. That's a valid concern. What we can do is try a little hue saturation. Let's see what else we can do. The blue is good. Yeah, I don't even need to change the lightness. I think just like maybe a little blue instead of a blue-green. What do you think? So before, after? Cool. So in just a moment, I'm going to get into how to save your PDF, your JPEG, and your backup your PSD. But first, you may be wondering, how does one go about choosing the fonts that they want to use for their design? And I thought I'd give you, this is a short little animation on what all these fonts are, where they came from. And I think it's going to help you in choosing your fonts that you decide to use for your poster. So let's take a look.
Type is power. The power to express words and ideas visually. It's timeless, but always changing. And that's what we're going to explore. Most people agree that the creator of typography was a German man named Johannes Gutenberg, and yes, he wore a hat like that. Before Gutenberg came along and revolutionized the world of communication, books needed to be scribed by hand, usually by monks, which was very time-consuming and expensive. So Gutenberg created blackletter, the first ever typeface, modeled after the writing of the scribes. Blackletter has thick vertical lines and thin horizontal connectors, which made it great for scribing, but it looked very dense and squished together when printed. Something needed to change. Enter Roman type. This particular typeface is Cambria, which you're probably used to seeing on your word processor, but the first ever Roman typeface was created in the 15th century by the Frenchman Nicolas Jenson. This is his typeface right here. Jenson worked mainly in Venice, Italy, and was inspired by the lettering found on ancient Roman buildings. His letter forms were based on straight lines and regular curves. This made them very clear and legible compared to the dense darkness of blackletter. This legible new typeface was an instant success, and quickly spread across Europe, riding on the coattails of the Renaissance. The next major innovation in typography after Roman letters was italics, which are like slanted and stylized versions of Roman type. They were created in the late 15th century by Aldus Manutius from Italy as a way of fitting more letters onto the page and saving money. Now we use italics interspersed in Roman type for emphasis. Aldus Manutius also created the modern comma and semicolon, but that's another story. Type development stayed fairly stagnant until the 18th century in England, when William Caslon created a typeface that set a new standard for legibility. While it wasn't anything radical, it was just what the world was looking for. The style of Caslon's typeface is now referred to as Old Style. A few decades later, another Brit named John Baskerville created a new variety of typeface, which we call transitional. Later still, a Frenchman named Didot and an Italian named Doni created typefaces that we have classified as modern. Most serif typefaces fit into one of these three categories, but what does each category mean? An old-style typeface has letters that have thick serifs and low contrast between thick and thin strokes. A transitional typeface has letters with thinner serifs and a higher contrast between thick and thin strokes. And a modern typeface has letters with very thin serifs and extreme contrast between thick and thin strokes. Next, William Caslon's great-grandson, named William Caslon IV, got sick of all of these serifs, so he decided to remove them entirely and made a new kind of typeface, called a sans serif. It didn't catch on immediately, but would eventually get really big. During the Second Industrial Revolution, advertising created a need for new typefaces. Letters were made taller and wider, mainly used in large sizes on posters and billboards. Things got pretty weird, but one happy result of all of this experimentation is Egyptian, or slab serif. It has really thick serifs and is usually used for titles. As a backlash to the complexity found in typefaces of the 19th century, the early 20th century brought something simple. Paul Renner from Germany created a typeface called Futura, and it was based on simple geometric shapes. This is called the geometric sans. Around the same time, a British man named Eric Gill created a typeface called Gill Sans that was similar to a geometric sans, but with gentler, more natural curves, and this is called a humanist sans. The next major step in the world of sans serifs happened in Switzerland in 1957 with the introduction of Helvetica. It has simple curves and is available in many different weights, and some would call it the world's favorite typeface. The world of typography changed forever with the introduction of the computer. There were a few difficult years of crude pixel type due to the primitive screen technology. But then technology evolved and computers began to allow for the creation of thousands of beautiful typefaces. And the odd dud. But now anyone has the freedom to create their own unique typeface. And that is the history of typography.
Okay, so you have all of these fonts to choose from, but should you use them all? No. The general rule in graphic design is that you want to stick to 1 or 2 typefaces per design. You know, a lot of times students, once they know that they can play with all these fonts and everything, there's a tendency to want to put 3 or 4 different fonts on one design, and that ends up looking really cluttered, really hard to read. And you know, I know once you're starting out with design and you find out there's all these things you can do, you want to make your project as complicated as possible, but that's not usually the best way to do it. Usually the best designs are very, very simple. So think about how you can make your design simple. You know, it needs to have all the requirements. It needs to have a slogan. It needs to have 3 images combined together. It needs to have, you know, a website URL. But think about the most important thing is something that's readable, something that makes sense to people, and something that is aesthetically pleasing to look at. So I'm going to add a few other, you know, fancy things that you can do with this assignment, and then we'll jump over into the assessment. So I think plain is good. This is a very simple design, and I think that's what makes it effective. If you want to just add a little spice to your design, textures are a great way to do this. You can go on Google and you can find all sorts of textures on the Google search, but you need to make sure that you search for things in a way that is legal, right? So we're all friends with Google image search, and we know that when you can't just use whatever image you find on Google Images, you have to go over here to Tools, and you have to click on Usage Rights, labeled for use modification, and you want to use something, of course, large. So if you are, in this case, looking for a cute raccoon picture, labeled for use but with modification, large, and then we'll find one. Let's use this guy. Click on it, and then you want to click on it and view it full screen first before you download it. Because if you download the small version of this image, it's going to be a thumbnail size, and it's not going to look good in your design. So anytime you're using images for a poster, for a project, you want to make sure that they are large and high resolution, meaning you can see all the little hair details, all the little details, and then you will control click, save image as, and then name it and put it on your desktop. So let's say we're looking for textures. A good term to look for would be something like paper texture. Then you can go to labeled for use modification, you know, something nice and large. And some of these websites you have to sign in to join. So I'm just looking through these and seeing if I can find like a Wikimedia Commons. Here we go. And now I'm going to click on it. Ooh, and now we have this interesting texture here that's sort of a leathery skin type texture. And so I will control click, save image as, And now I can bring that into my project and use it as a texture. So I'm going to go to File, Place Embedded. I'm going to browse to that texture. The problem is, we thought we had a nice large picture, but when we bring it into our document, it's actually too small for the document. So in this case, I would recommend finding something much bigger. And we know that it's too small because we look up here, which says width is 100, height is 100, and we can't make it any bigger. Remember, we're not allowed to stretch anything past 100. So now I'm going to go to File, Place Embedded, and I'll find a texture that actually is the right size. Now, when we look up here at the width and the height, we're seeing that this texture was brought in. It's only at 33%. So we can increase the size much more until it completely fills up our document. And now we can put this on different blending modes and see what happens. So if I were to put this on the overlay blending mode, the white would stay white, but the midtones would have the texture show up. I'm going to enter a return to place this, and I'm going to command semicolon to get rid of our guidelines. So that's what this looks like on the overlay blending mode. Then let's see what hard light looks like. So with hard light, the texture is showing up not just in the midtones, but in the highlights and shadows as well, which makes hard light really a good blending mode for adding texture. Unfortunately, it's a little bit too much. I just like to tone it down a little bit. So I'm gonna go to the opacity and I'm gonna lower the opacity. And so now we have a slight texture happening in the background, but not too much. Now, another thing we can do is add a little vignette, which we learned about in our week 2 assignment. And I'm just gonna paint a vignette by hand. So I'm gonna make a new layer. I'm gonna get my paintbrush out, and I'm gonna hit D for default. And I'm just gonna paint around the edge with my paintbrush. And I like just painting a vignette like this because it kind of has like a natural handmade quality. It's not like a perfect circle, which is kind of nice. This is a little bit on the dark side, so I'm just gonna lower the opacity. And so now, just like a faint little shadow, and I think that's nice. Alrighty, now let's save this the way that we have to save it. First, I'm gonna save the PSD file for backup. And then I'm going to save the JPEG and the PDF for submission. So I'm going to go to File, Save As, and you guys all should be making a folder on your desktop called DES104 Schoolwork. And you're naming your files DES104, that's our class, _ week 4 _ your name. So that is the PSD. This is not what you're going to be turning in. Do not turn in the PSD. Do not turn in the PSD. You're going to be turning in a PDF and a JPEG, but it is very, very important that you follow my steps to saving the PDF correctly, or else it will not work and it will look bad. Oh, I just saw in the comments, Josh asked, how did you do that again? What was it that I did, saving the PDF, PSD rather? Do you want me to go over that again? Oh, the vignette? Okay, yeah, sure. So to make the vignette, I make a new layer just by hitting Shift Command N. And then I go to my brush tool, my paintbrush, and I make sure that I'm painting with black. Make sure my opacity is 100%. I'm using a very big brush, like 2100, and I'm using a soft edge brush. And now I'm just kind of painting around the corner, the edges here. And now I'm lowering the opacity. Okay, so the next thing we're gonna do is save the PDF. But here's the thing. We need to rasterize all our layers first, because if we don't rasterize all of our layers, some of them might not print, some of them might not show up, and things will end up being bad. So first step is to go up to layer at the top of the screen. Write this down, guys. This is really important. Go up to layer at the top of the screen. Layer, rasterize all layers. Now I'm going to merge all my layers together without deleting them. And to do that, I'm going to go to Shift, Command, Option E. Write that down, you guys. Shift, Command, Option E. And if you're on a PC, it's going to be Shift, Control, Alt, E. Shift, Command, Option E, or Shift, Control, Alt, E. Write that down. Okay, so step one is go up to Layer, rasterize all layers. Step two is to go to Shift, Command, Alt, E. Rasterize turns your vector layers and your smart objects and your text layers into pixel-based layers. Now we're going to go up to Image, Mode, CMYK. So we're changing our image mode from RGB color. RGB color gives us all of the filters and blending modes to play with. But CMYK color is what we need for print. So image mode CMYK, and then we're going to click OK. We're not going to flatten it. Click OK. And then click OK. Now we're going to go to File, Save As, and where it says Format here, we're going to select Photoshop PDF. So you guys see that? Photoshop PDF. And this is also really important. Uncheck layers. Write this down on your notes, guys. Right? Uncheck layers and circle that. Uncheck layers and circle it. Now, this is also really important. You're going to select smallest file size, so it uploads nicely to the gradebook. And then make sure preserve Photoshop editing capabilities is not checked. Make sure preserve Photoshop editing capabilities is not checked. And then you're going to hit save PDF. Okay, so now we don't want to, we have the PDF saved, and so we're ready to submit that. But we don't want to accidentally save our Photoshop document as, you know, with all these rasterized layers and in CMYK mode. So we're going to undo a lot of steps. So I'm going to Option Command Z or Alt Command Z once, and that converted our document back from CMYK to RGB. Option Command Z again, and that got rid of our merged layer. Option Command Z again, and that got rid of our rasterized layers. Option Command Z undid the steps that we just did. Now what I'm going to do is do the final requirement, which is saving the JPEG that is shrunk down to 500 pixels on its shortest side. So saving the JPEG that's shrunk down to 500 pixels on its shortest side. So I'm going to go to Image, Image Size. And the first thing we're going to change is resolution. So I'm going to go to 72. So the first thing I do is change the resolution to 72. And now the width, which is the shortest file, the shortest side of the document, we're going to change that to 500. And make sure that the width and height are locked so that the height changes as well. Because if the width changes but the height doesn't change, you're going to end up with a weird looking document. So make sure that your width is 500 and your height is 773 and your resolution is 72. Does everyone have that? And now I'm going to click OK. And now we're going to save the JPEG. So I'm going to go to File, Export, Save for Web, File, Export, Save for Web. And we're going to select JPEG from the drop-down menu. JPEG high is good. And then we're going to click Save. Browse to our folder. And you might be wondering, wow, this JPEG looks really small. But keep in mind, we're only viewing it at 16%. When I Command plus sign, 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 that's what 100% looks like. So that's a good, you know, size for the web, and it's going to show up nicely in the gradebook. Alrighty, you guys, any questions on this poster? Because I can then move on to the assessment if you like. Oh, so if I want to convert it back, before I save this as a Photoshop document again, I'm going to Option Command Z, and this is I should Option Command Z before I exit out of Photoshop, because I do want to make sure that it's nice and big, and then File, Save. So that's why it's really important to always save your PSD. That's as full resolution and large as possible. Because if you accidentally exit out of Photoshop and save it like as a really small file that you had converted for JPEG, you're going to be bummed out. So Option Command Z before you quit for the day. And if you didn't save your PSD, if you just saved your JPEG, then you're out of luck because you're never gonna be able to edit it again. So the difference between just straight saving it as a JPEG by going to File, Save as JPEG, and exporting it, File, Save for Web, is that if you just go File, Save as JPEG, it's going to be a huge file. In some cases, that JPEG might be 30 megabytes. And you know, we want to make files that are nice and small that upload to the gradebook quickly. And so that's why I recommend going File, Export, Save for Web, because it's going to make a document that's, let's look at this document size. So this JPEG File, Export, Save for Web was 76 kilobytes. Whereas if I were to straight save it as a JPEG by going to File, Save as JPEG, it might be like over a megabyte. It might be like even 10 megabytes. So it just optimizes it and makes it smaller. All right, and for your assessment, you get to play with blending modes. And this assessment will take you all of like 5 minutes to do. It's really easy. But it's your chance to play with resizing and putting textures on things and using blending modes and colorizing things. So first thing, really, I know I'm gonna still get a million questions about this, but really, really important, texture 2 is not a JPEG. And we threw that in there so that you're forced to learn. Texture 2 is an EPS file. And you have to convert your EPS file to a JPEG before you can bring it into your Photoshop document. Okay, so you have to convert texture 2 from an EPS file to a JPEG before you try and import it into your document. And I'm going to be showing you how to do that. And if you just try to straight import your EPS file into your Photoshop document, it's not gonna happen. So let's download everything first. Download the image, which is this tree picture. Download texture 1. Download texture 2. Download texture 3. Yes, you're definitely welcome to use textures from the assessment on the assignment. And download texture 4. Okay, so the first thing we're gonna do is File, Open. File, Open. And we're not making a new document first. We are just straight opening this document. And something that's going to be really helpful is putting guidelines to help you align your textures. So I'm going to click on the ruler and draw out this guideline. Command +sign. I'm going to use V, which is my move tool, to move this guideline into place. Zoom in really, really close. There we go. And then I'm going to drag this guideline down here. And there, now I have my guidelines, and it's going to make it much easier for me to place the textures on this document. So now I'm going to go to File, Place Embedded. And I'll bring in the first texture. So I'm going to bring it up to this corner here. And then I'm going to hold down the Shift button and click and drag without changing the proportions. Zoom in really, really close, Command plus sign, to make sure that it lines up nicely. Okay, so there is texture 1 placed on my document. And so I'm going to hit enter or return. Now is the fun part. You get to choose which texture or which blending mode you think is going to be most appropriate for this texture. So this has a lot of light and dark. So if you want just the light parts to show through, screen would be a great blending mode for you to use. And in my pre-recorded lecture, I discuss in depth what each of the blending modes do. But screen makes white opaque and black transparent. So if you want things to look sparkly and you want only the sparkles to show through, screen is great for that. If you want only the black to show through, you would use multiply, right? That's a much different sort of texture. You can also try overlay. You can also try hard light. Anyway, you're welcome to try all of these blending modes. Vivid light's nice. Actually, I like vivid light because it's increased the contrast and it lets the sparkles show through. But try a different blending mode on each one, and you want to choose the blending mode that really makes the texture stand out. If you're choosing a blending mode, say like, you know, saturation or hue, and it doesn't do anything because your texture just doesn't work with that blending mode, you're not going to get points. I want to see you use a blending mode that really brings out the texture. Okay, so as I said, texture 2 is an EPS file. So you can't just place it into Photoshop. What you have to do is convert it to a JPEG first. So first we need to figure out what size JPEG we want to convert it to. And to do that, first we have to find out what size this document is. So I'm going to go to Image, Image Size. And this document is 5,000 pixels by 5,000 pixels. So that's a pretty good size that I'm going to use for our EPS document. So I'm going to go to File, Open, and I'm going to open that EPS document. And now it's going to ask me to convert it to a raster file. And so to do that, I'm going to change this to pixels. And I'm going to make the width 5,000 pixels and the height 5,000 pixels and the resolution 300. And now I'm going to click OK, and it's going to do some chugging, and it's going to rasterize the file. And then once I've rasterized that file, I want to save it as a JPEG so that I can re-bring it into this document. Does anyone want me to do that again? Okay. Yeah, I'll do it again. Let me just wait for it to open. It's rasterizing, so it's chugging along. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to post them now while we wait for this file to rasterize. There it is. Okay, so now that the file has rasterized, now I can save it as a JPEG by going to File, Save As, and I'll save it to my Downloads folder, and I'll call this a JPEG. Okay, so we're gonna do that again. We're gonna convert that EPS file to a JPEG. So step one, we're gonna go to File, Open, write this down, guys. File, Open. And then we're gonna click on Week 4 Assessment Image Texture 2.eps. Week 4 Assessment Image Texture 2.eps. And now we're gonna click Open. It's gonna ask us what size we want to make our image. So see here where it says inches, we're gonna change it to pixels. Change inches to pixels. And the size that we're gonna make this is 5,000. Am I going too fast? Does anyone want me to redo this again? And now I'm gonna click OK. Now it's rasterizing. And now there is our image. And we want to now save it as a JPEG so we can bring it into our document. So I'm going to go to File, Save As. I'm going to save it as a JPEG. And now it's ready to bring into my document. Does anyone want me to do that again? Okay, so let's bring in this former EPS file, which is now a JPEG, into our document by going to File, Place Embedded. And now I'm going to hold down the Shift button and click and drag. Zoom in nice and close. Command + sign to zoom in. Got it lined up right there with the edges. Now I can hit Enter or Return. Command - sign to zoom out. And now we need to put that on a blending mode. So since this has black and a color in it, multiply might be good for it. It's kind of cool. You can also try putting it on color burn, which is also kind of cool. And you can also try color dodge, which just makes the texture kind of show up in the tree itself. But you can try any of these, you know, if overlay might be your thing, hard light might be your thing. Let's do a little difference even. That kind of looks cool. I'll leave it on difference. Okay, now I'm going to go File, Place Embedded. Hold down the Shift button, click and drag. Enter a return. Okay, so now I've placed that image over the illustration, and now I'm going to change the blending mode to, how about hard light? Yeah, I like hard light because you can see the texture, you can also see the color, and it's really interesting. So now, final one, File, Place Embedded. And this one is going to be a little bit of a tough texture because it's so faint. It's a paper texture, but if you don't choose the right blending mode, you know, you're not going to hardly see anything. So we want to find something that's going to really bring out this this paper texture and these wrinkles. And I'm just using, by the way, when you see me kind of like budge the texture into place, like see how it's overlapping a little bit. I'm hitting the down arrow on my keyboard to budge it down, and then the left arrow on my keyboard just to move it into place. And same for this one. I want to make sure that, yep, looks good. I want to make sure that everything is perfectly aligned, because if it's not aligned, you're going to see seams where the two overlap, and it's going to be really ugly. So part of your grade is making sure these are all perfectly aligned. And now let's try a blending mode such as pin light. So what I like about pin light is it really allowed that texture to show through. If I were to put this just on like overlay, you can't even see anything. Like, yeah, you can hardly see anything. If you put it on hard light, that's a little bit better. Soft light, can't even really see anything. Color, you're not going to see anything. So I like either pin light or hard light. I'm going to go with pin light. Okay, final step is we're going to use hue saturation, and we're going to put a hue saturation over everything. So I'm going to go down to the circle that's light on one side, dark on the other at the bottom of the layer panel. And I'm going to click on hue saturation. And I'm going to click colorize, and then you can just choose whatever color it is that you want. And now, as always, you're going to always save the PSD document. So you're going to go File, Save As. And we'll call this DES104Week4 assessment. Your name. And then we're also going to save the JPEG. File, export, save for web. JPEG high is good, and now I'm going to hit save. And ta-da! Any questions? Does anyone want me to go over anything about this assessment one more time? Or any questions about anything at all? This is your time. Cool. So final wrap up about the principles of design. We really want to make sure that we use the principles of design when you're designing your posters this week. So, and these principles are contrast. This is the first principle, contrast. So contrast usually refers to in terms of value. So a lot of people think, okay, contrast in terms of color. So green and red are contrasting colors. So I can put green text on a red background. No, 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 no. If you put green text, medium value green on a medium value red, it's going to be very, very hard to read. When we're talking about contrast, in order for things to be readable, we're talking about lightness and darkness. So a dark, 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 dark red text on a light, 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 light green background is good contrast. But if you do something like this, where you have a medium value blue on a medium value red, it's going to be hard to read and it's going to have that vibration effect in your eyes. So always choose contrast in terms of value. Repetition means repeating the same thematic ideas over and over and over again, whether it's the same font, whether it's the same color, whether it's the same shape. If you use rounded rectangles, you always use rounded rectangles in your design to keep everything consistent. Alignment, this is why we make the grids and the guides. So alignment gives your design structure. That's why we line up the text elements with the image elements, rather than just placing everything all over the place wherever. Alignment gives a structure and it makes your design more appealing. And proximity is about grouping things together. So think about, okay, what's the focal point of your design? What's the thing that you want people to look at first? Then you put your image element there, you group your text around that image element so that their eyes are drawn to it. You help to use proximity to create that focal point. Group things that belong together. So a good strategy for success with laying out your design is to use guides and grids. Decide whether you're going to use symmetrical balance, which is what I did, where I put everything in the center, or asymmetrical balance, where you kind of put things at an angle, or use the rule of thirds. And I demonstrate both symmetrical and asymmetrical balance in your pre-recorded lectures this week. And I also demonstrate the rule of thirds, so you can check out the pre-recorded lecture for a little info on that. And visual hierarchy, the idea that certain things are more important than others. And I thought I'd show you guys something kind of funny, but also very true and very important for graphic design. There's this book designer named Chip Kidd, and he is a really fantastic designer, and he has some really, really good ideas related to design. And his first rule that he talks about here in this little short video, I think is something that especially student designers really need to understand. So this is kind of a funny little video, but it has some really important design things to think about.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have devoted the past 25 years of my life to designing books. The first day of my graphic design training at Penn State University, the teacher, Lanny Simis, came into the room and he drew a picture of an apple on the blackboard and wrote the word apple underneath. And he said, "Okay, lesson 1, listen up." And he covered up the picture and he said, "You either say this, and then he covered up the word, or you show this. But you don't do this. Because this is treating your audience like a moron. Augustine Burroughs wrote a memoir called This, and it's about his time in rehab. In his 20s, he was a hotshot ad executive, and as Mad Men has told us, a raging alcoholic. He did not think so, however, but his co-workers did an intervention, and they said, you are going to rehab, or you will be fired and you will die. Now, to me, this was always going to be a typographic solution, what I would call the opposite of Type 101. What does that mean? Usually on the first day of Introduction to Typography, you get the assignment of select a word and make it look like what it says it is. So that's Type 101, right? Very simple stuff. This is going to be the opposite of that. I want this book to look like it's lying to you, desperately and hopelessly, the way an alcoholic would. The answer was the most low-tech thing you can imagine. I set up the type, I printed it out on an Epson printer with water-soluble ink, taped it to the wall, and threw a bucket of water at it. Presto. Then when we went to press, the printer put a spot gloss on the ink, and it really looked like it was running. Not long after it came out, Augustine was waylaid in an airport, and he was hiding out in the bookstore, spying on who was buying his books. And this woman came up to it, and she squinted, and she took it to the register, and she said to the man behind the counter, "This one's ruined." And the guy behind the counter said, "I know, lady, they all came in that way."
Now that's
So be creative with your typography. I can't tell you how many times I see students doing that, showing an apple and then actually like having the type there. And of course we're not talking about apples, but if you're doing like a Save the Earth and you actually like have a picture of the Earth, you don't treat your audience like a moron is what we're saying. Use your creativity to really find ways and interesting ways to make your designs nice and artful. So since you guys are soon to be going out into the world as graphic designers, now that you have your first graphic design training under your belt, congratulations. I thought I would share with you guys some tips for how to put your portfolio together, the types of things that you want to bring to an interview, and how to stay in someone's minds when they are when you're going in for that interview. So this is my short little video on things I personally bring to graphic design and art interviews, and I hope you enjoy it, and then we'll have questions afterwards. Hey you guys, so I want to do a little show and tell with you all today. I have some things that I bring to interviews, and I hope that you guys get these various items made, and so that you can bring them to your interviews and have a lot of success on your job search. So this first thing I'm going to show you is what I call the Leave Behind portfolio. There you go. And this is what I get printed at lulu.com, and it has all of my artwork in it, my favorite artwork, let's say that. And this is then something that I can leave with the client or employer that I'm interviewing with. They're really inexpensive. They're between $10 and $20 for each one to get printed. And so you can get a stack of these made, 50 of them, take a look. And then when you go on job interviews, you can leave this with the people that you're interviewing with. And even if they don't hire you, maybe they find someone else whose style is a little bit better fit for their project, they're going to have another project come up. And they're going to remember you because this is going to sit on their shelf. It's way too nice to throw away. And they'll think, oh, that person's style is a much better fit for this project that we're working on. So they're going to give you a call, and this is just a great way to stay in someone's memory by leaving these with the people that you interview with. Now, another thing I get made are these postcards. And I get these made at overnightprints.com. On one side, let's see, it has my contact info, and on the other side it has my artwork. And these are nice and big and colorful, and so they're not going to be stuffed into someone's purse and forgotten about. These might go on someone's fridge or on someone's bulletin board in their office. And then when they have a project come up, you know, they're going to look at your artwork hanging there, and they're going to give you a call. So get a bunch of these made, overnightprints.com. Really inexpensive, and you can get the rounded edges, you can get the shiny on one side, the matte on the other side. And these will be something that you will use to stay in someone's mind when they're hiring for projects. Now, I also have my actual big printed, you know, carrying case portfolio that has all of my artwork mounted on these, I guess you could say, kind of hard mat board or cardstock. I don't print these and make them myself. I get all of my artwork together on a disc or a CD, and then when I'm ready to get it printed, I'll go to Kinko's or Staples, and I just ask them to print it and mount it on black mat board and cut it, you know, so it's all nice and pretty. And all of my pieces together to get printed and mounted only costed like $100. And you have these forever. And as you make art that gets better and better, you can start to throw away or give away the pieces that you don't need anymore and replace them with the pieces that you do like. And yeah, so just carry this in a little carrying case, you know, when you go to your interviews. Take out each of these pieces individually and pass them around the table with the people that you're interviewing with so that they can look at them up close and they can pass them and talk about them with their colleagues and everything. And then the next thing is, of course, your resume. And you're going to want to get some nice, clean, good-looking resume paper. Staples, Kinko's, you know, you can get this a lot of places. And this is a resume paper that has texture to it, and it's got some thickness to it, and you want to print out tons of copies of your resume because you're going to go from job interview to job interview. You're going to be interviewed by between 3 and 5 other people, and you want to just be able to whip out your resume, and you want to be able to have lots of resumes available whenever you need to hand it to people. And the last thing, I have these little mugs that I got made at Zazzle.com, and these are like little leave behind presents. So every job interview you go on, you leave a little present with the person that you're interviewing with. And this is going to stay on their desk. This is going to be used for drinking out of or used as a little container for people's pens. And this is just another way to stay in someone's memory, and then when a project comes up and your style kind of fits with that project, they'll give you a call. You can also get little mouse pads made, and you can give those away during your interview. And periodically during holidays like Halloween, New Year's, you could just send out these little presents to different companies that you've interviewed with, and they're going to have another little present from you and another way to kind of stay in their mind and on their radar when a project comes up that your style fits. Alrighty, you guys, so I will open up the rest of the class to any questions if you guys have any. And if not, you are free to go. Have a great night, Maria. Thank you. Thank you, Josh. Have a great night. Oh, great question, Josh. So multi-sessions are at the same time, and they are on, so tomorrow night and the night after tomorrow. So Wednesday and Thursday nights, just come in here. And it seems like my microphone might have just crapped out. So Wednesday and Thursday nights. Oh, you still hear me? Good. Okay, because it just like said, your microphone is not working. Like what? But Wednesday and Thursday nights at 5 p.m. Mountain Time. No problem at all. If you take any of the advanced Photoshop classes, I will be teaching that. So good luck in the rest of your design classes. I know you guys will do good.